In this lesson, we'll learn how we can modify an existing shape or path using the pen tool. Alright, so in the previous lesson, we learned really a lot of different methods for drawing different types of paths using the pen tool. Now, there's a few things we haven't talked about yet, and we're going to go ahead and continue talking about the pen tool now. Now, let me just go ahead and switch over to my rectangle tool for just a moment. I want to pull in a couple of basic shapes up here. My rectangle tool with the keyboard shortcut M. Let's go ahead and grab my ellipse tool with the keyboard shortcut L. Draw in one shape that has some straight paths and one that has some curved paths. So we'll just reposition those. Now, remember, we've talked about the different types of anchor points that we can generate, being either a corner anchor point or a smooth anchor point, such as this one here with Bezier handles. Now, there are some options up in our control panel for modifying these, and we're going to hit on a couple of those now. Let's just select this corner anchor point in this square, and notice that the first two buttons here are for convert. We can see that we have that anchor point selected because it says anchor point right here. Now, this first one is irrelevant for this anchor point because it's already a corner anchor point. But this second button is going to convert that corner anchor point to a smooth anchor point and pull out a couple of Bezier handles for us. Now, in the last lesson, we pulled that out using the Convert Anchor Point tool, but this is just another quick little button that allows you to grab some Bezier handles for an anchor point, and if you don't need to necessarily position them manually. So let me just go ahead and undo that here. Now, these next two options here pertain to selecting multiple anchor points. So I tell you what, let's go ahead and move over here to our ellipse, and let's go ahead and drag a marquee selection around this anchor point, and let's go ahead and drag one around this one by holding down Shift so we can get them both selected here. Now, notice that by default, when I select both of these two anchor points, we don't see the Bezier handles for those. We do see one of the Bezier handles for each of these anchor points, but we don't see them at all for the two we have selected. Now, notice here that this button here is selected currently. Now, this is the button that hides Bezier handles for selected anchor points. If we were to go ahead and hit this button here, we're going to reveal both of those two anchor points Bezier handles, just like so. Now, I know that there are some more options over here in this control panel. We're not going to talk about those just yet. I'm going to go ahead and switch back to my pen tool here. And let's talk about the other functionality of this tool, which is modifying existing shapes or paths. So we can actually add to or subtract from a path or a shape using the pen tool after it's already drawn. So remember, the little X means that the pen tool is ready to begin drawing a new path, and it doesn't change if we mouse over this path right here. Now, if we mouse over the corner and the anchor point here, again, no change. Now, I don't have this shape selected right now. Let me go ahead and hold down Control and draw a marquee selection around the shape. And notice here that if I do that and I mouse over the path, the pen tool changes and it has a little plus sign next to it. Now, this is going to add an anchor point. Now, if we look up here in this little tool set for our pen tool, we actually have an Add Anchor Point tool here. Now, to be honest with you, I very rarely, if ever, use either the Add Anchor Point tool or the Delete Anchor Point tool here, just simply because you can do both right from your main pen tool. So let me go ahead and just add an anchor point to this path that I'm mousing over right now. Now, with the pen tool in this state with the little plus sign next to it, all I have to do is click on this path. And let me go ahead and use my modifier key to switch to the convert anchor, or the direct selection arrow, and I'm just going to pull this anchor point up. So you can see exactly the type of anchor point that has been created here. Notice we don't have any Bezier handles because we added an anchor point to a straight path. Now let me just undo that here. Now, with this shape selected, notice what happens if I mouse over the corner anchor point here. The pen changes its state, and it now has a little minus sign next to it. So it's automatically knows that we want to possibly remove this anchor point. So let me go ahead and just click now on that anchor point, and you can see here that that anchor point has been removed from this shape, and the paths on either side of it have adjusted themselves accordingly. Now let's switch modes over here, and let's go ahead and move over to this ellipse and see what happens when we add anchor points to an ellipse. Now, I've selected the entire thing here, and we can see all the Bezier handles. So let me just go ahead and zoom in real tight on that for you. And let's go ahead and click here somewhere where we're not clicking on a Bezier handle. Now we're going to add an anchor point to this path right here. And I don't know if you can see that or not, but the anchor point that we've clicked and added actually now has Bezier handles as well. Now, what Illustrator is doing when we add this anchor point is it's automatically pulling the Bezier handles out based on the position we added the anchor point in along this path segment, so that this path segment is not modified at all. So that's how these Bezier handles are being pulled out to the point they currently are. Now, let's go ahead and just undo that addition here, and let's talk about removing an anchor point from this ellipse. Now, if I mouse over one of these anchor points, we see the little minus sign next to the pen tool, just as before, and let me go ahead and click on that anchor point here to remove that. Now, notice what happened here. We have removed that anchor point, and the path segments on either side of it have been merged into one segment, but we don't have a straight path here, a straight path segment. We actually still have a curved path segment because of this anchor point here and this anchor point here and the Bezier handles that are left over. Now, what happens if we actually wanted to create sort of a half ellipse shape here? Maybe we didn't want a curved edge right here on this top side of our ellipse. So let's just undo that here. And remember, we can actually use our direct selection arrow to select either a path segment or an anchor point. So let's see what happens if we just click on this path segment here and we just delete that using our backspace key. You can see here that that path segment has been deleted, but we still have anchor points here. Now, we've also opened up this shape. I'm going to go ahead and undo that here and show you what happens if we select an anchor point and delete that. Let me go ahead and select this anchor point here. I'm going to use my smart guides to make sure I'm mousing over the anchor point, and let me select that. Let's go ahead and use our backspace key to delete that anchor point. You can see here we've opened up this shape here again, and we now have no path segment connecting these two anchor points. Now, at this point, we could come in here and select either one of these two, or rather both of these two anchor points by drawing a selection around them with our Control modifier key, then hitting Control J to connect the two. Just like so, creating our half ellipse shape. Now, let's undo that here, and let's just say for a moment that maybe we actually wanted two of these, and we wanted to create that from that original ellipse we had. Now, we could just copy this one over and duplicate that, but let's just undo that back to our original ellipse here and talk about another tool that's related very closely to the pen tool. Now, the pen tool all has its subtools sort of in this same tool set right here, but the tool we're going to talk about is actually the scissors tool. Now, the scissors tool keyboard shortcut is C, and if you're looking for that in your tool panel, it's nested underneath your eraser tool. So let me go ahead and select that here. Now, what the scissors tool is going to allow us to do is it's going to allow us to cut the path of either an open or closed shape. So let's just go ahead and take a look at how that works here. Let's go ahead and just draw a marquee selection around this ellipse here, and let's say we wanted to create those two halves here. I'm going to go ahead and just mouse over that anchor point here, and using my smart guides I can see that I'm over the anchor point. So let me just click once here, and well, there's been no visible change, but I know there has been a change, but we need to click another anchor point. So let's go ahead and click on this anchor point right here. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and select my selection tool, because that selects objects and groups of objects, and you can see here that we can actually select both halves of this ellipse and pull them apart. And now we're left with two open shapes. So if we want these to be closed shapes, we'll need to actually go in and close these paths off. But we've got two shapes and we've split that ellipse in half now. I'm going to go ahead and show you one other way to do this. Let me go ahead and just undo that here. Alright, so make sure we've got that back to its original state. Now, if I come in here and I select just one of these anchor points, just like so, there's actually a couple tools we can use up here in the control panel. We have this button right here, which will actually remove the anchor point, just like so. That's not what we're looking for, but we have this button right here, which will actually snip that anchor point like it's been clicked with the scissors tool. So let's go ahead and click that. Then we can come over here and select this anchor point and click that again. And this shape is going to act just like we used the scissors tool on it here. And we're going to be able to split that into two different paths. I'm going to go ahead and pull those two paths apart here and say we wanted to rejoin these, but we want these to be rejoined and sort of fill in the gaps here. Let's go ahead and talk about a couple ways we could do that. We've already learned how we can join two anchor points by drawing a marquee selection around them, but we can actually use the pen tool to do that as well. So let me just mouse over this one. Now we get that little slash indicating we're going to continue drawing this path. I'm going to go ahead and click that there, and let me just mouse over this one here. We see another new little state for our pen tool, and it looks sort of like a square with a line drawn through it, or a link of some kind. Let me go ahead and just click this anchor point now, and we're going to link these two paths together. So we can go ahead and do the same thing over here. Let's go ahead and click on this first anchor point, and if we click this second anchor point here, now we're going to close this path. Just like so. So we've created a new shape by cutting our ellipse in half, stretching it out, and then rejoining the two paths. Alright, so in this lesson we have learned about modifying shapes or paths using the pen tool. Now, just to sum things up and review the modifier keys, I know there were a lot of them. The modifier keys were Control to access the Direct Selection tool, Alt, which accesses the Convert Anchor Point tool, and Spacebar occasionally, which lets you reposition an anchor point as you draw it. So in the next lesson, we're going to pick up where we're leaving off here and talk a little bit about drawing freeform paths.